Can people hear me now?
People
See
can
me
hear
now?
you now.
Could people not hear me before?
Not before.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm reading through all these comments and I'm reading through that TJ was saying, this was the nicest thing. He was like, well, I'm going to wait here. And then he was like, it's not like her. I hope that she's okay. So can someone ping TJ Suter on LinkedIn and tell him that it started right now at 5:32 my time.
5:32. Let's see. What time is it? It is 12:32 a.m. here in Tokyo.
Can everyone jump in the chat? Give me your name, company, role, and what you showed up for today. That's something that I want to know kind of in the meantime. So can everyone hear us okay in the chat?
Can everyone hear us? Check,
I
check,
don't
check.
know. Oh, we got Rich Ambrose. Okay. Can y'all hear us or no?
Yes. Everyone started coming in.
Okay. I can't. Oh, okay. Now I see. Okay. Now I see all of these. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get used to a new platform. Okay. So we've got, hi, Rich. How's it going? Is it Christo or Christa Burger? Excited to learn about diagnostic selling. Tony, Oracle. I talk about Oracle all the time. Like whenever I'm using a company example, I constantly use Oracle because I feel like it's the trump card on one of the best companies that ever existed. No pressure. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is going to be webinar 1 of diagnostic selling. I'm excited to go through the framework. So I have with me right now Min. Say hi, Min, to everyone.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
So we are trying out this new platform, Zettel. So this is kind of the crash course. So Min's going to go backstage, I believe. I think first he's going to start a deck or something, and then he's going to go backstage. But I'm always going to encourage the one action item that I have from everyone is the more interactive, the better. The more questions, the better. The more thoughts from y'all, the better. In the meantime, Min is going to put a link to the asset of diagnostic selling in the meantime, but the better and better questions, the more and more questions that you have, I would love to hear your thoughts as we're kind of going through the content today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to hit play scene. Tell me if y'all can see. Can y'all see that? See that deck? Diagnostic selling. Awesome, Robert. Success. I'm not super technical, if you can't tell, so I was like sweating before this webinar. So we're going to go into this webinar today. We have a lot of content. I'm going to try and go as fast as I can, and we're going to go really, really deep. But just so you know, this was kind of taken from a place of, I have been probably trained under every methodology under the sun that I know that exists. I mean, you name it, I have probably been trained on it. From a legal perspective, I'm probably not going to name any of the famous training methodologies. But if you name it, I've been trained under it. And I grew as I learned, meaning as an account executive, I took some things from one methodology, some things from another methodology, some things from another methodology. But I noticed that I was missing the big picture of what am I really after in discovery. That's the punchline. Is what am I really after in discovery, and how can I actually add value to my buyer? How can I be helpful to them so that I don't feel like I'm pushing, I don't feel like I'm manipulating, I don't feel like I am trying to get them to think in a certain way, but how do I genuinely add value to them at every step of the way? So Gartner will tell you that they have a number of different statistics, but 86% of buyers today, regardless of what they're buying, don't want a seller involved. And that's a really scary statistic, but if I had to guess why, it's because there's not anything that they learn typically on a discovery call with an account executive that they didn't know beforehand. So I'm going to go as fast as I can in terms of this webinar. So I hope everyone has got their fresh coffee along the way, because we're going to be jumping into 3 different pieces of this as within the infrastructure of what I'm calling diagnostic selling. So part 1 that we're going to cover is going to be the true expertise of a seller. Can y'all see that light hitting on my face, by the way? It's 5 o'clock, 5:30 in Paris right now, so I just wanted to make sure that that didn't hit the entire way. So, the first part that we're going to cover is the only true expertise of a seller from my perspective. So, the true expertise of a seller, the only true expertise, let's see if anyone can guess it in the chat. What's the true expertise of a seller? What's the only value that we can add while we're in the room to a buyer? Let's see if anyone can guess it. What should we be really, really good at as a seller? Not objection handling, not convincing, listening, perspective. So, what is all that listening and gear up? Problem finder. I'll take it. It's the ability to diagnose. So, all of those are kind of congealed together, in my opinion. Finding problems, gaining trust, and the knowledge. But the only true ability of a seller, in my opinion, is their ability to diagnose. So I want you, if you are watching this, to do me a favor. Take your cap off of a seller and put your cap on for the rest of the webinar as the buyer. And think about the best buying experiences that you've had and what the engagement has been like back and forth and the types of value that the sellers who are valuable to you, what they offered. So the only value a prospect can typically get from a discovery call, typically the inbound flow at this point is pretty brutal within B2B SaaS in specific. You request a demo, you can't schedule right on the site. All of a sudden you get a couple of different follow-up emails, maybe 3 or 4 days later from an SDR. They beg to schedule some time with you. You jump on the call with the SDR. They ask you BANT questions. They're like, do you have budget? What's your need? Are you authority? What's the timeline? If you answer all those questions correctly, then you go to an AE. Maybe it's a week later. Maybe the AE shows up. Maybe the AE doesn't. And they typically have done no previous research. They haven't even listened to the SDR's, notes from the qualifying call. So the only value a prospect can get from a discovery call is going to be information that they didn't know beforehand. That's how we're going to anchor and we're going to define value. As the only value that they can incur from any kind of discovery call is going to be information that they didn't know beforehand. So typically when buyers jump on a call, there's one thing that buyers typically want to know on a discovery call, and is the only thing that they don't know that they believe that a seller does know. So Sam already got it. Everyone clap for Sam in the chat. There's only one thing that a buyer wants to know that they believe they don't know, that they believe that the seller does know. So they ask for it right off the bat, price. That is the value of discovery to date for our buyers. And if you're pain selling only, that is the only value to them, is price, because it's the only information that they didn't know beforehand. So even pain selling, when you break it down, if I'm just admitting to you a whole bunch of things that are painful for me as a buyer, those are things that I already knew. It might be valuable to you as a seller, but it's not valuable to me as a buyer. So we're going to go into 3 parts into part 1. Number 1, why would you diagnose? Number 2, what would you diagnose in discovery? And then number 3, how you can diagnose. So let's start with why. The reason that I would be after diagnosing in a room is because I want to correct a number of things. But the punchline of it is even if my buyer has self-diagnosed and they come on the inbound line and they tell me what they want, let's role play this for a second. A buyer comes to y'all and they say, this is what I want and this is what I need. Why would it be a bad idea to just sell it to them? Let's see if anyone can get it. So think of it like a doctor and a patient. Patient comes in and they say, this is the medication that I want, and this is the medication that I need. Why would it not be a good thing for the doctor to just vend the medication at that point? There you go. John already got it. Y'all are really smart. Because they might be wrong. The buyer might be wrong about what they want, and the buyer might be wrong about what they need because it's not their expertise, it's not their job to know what they want or what they need in regards to your products and services. So, most buyers today are going to look at 20 different variables before they come and reach out on an inbound demo request line. 20 different variables of research: the web, peer to peer, reviews, influencers, but they're trying to gather as much information as they can beforehand. And if I had to guess why, it's not because they want to do all of that process, it's not because they believe that they're an expert, it's because they believe the salesperson isn't. And so they have to rely on themselves and self education to make sure they don't diagnose incorrectly. So when it comes to diagnosing, here's your buyer's self diagnosis on the left. And I want you to envision your expert diagnosis on the right. Sometimes they will overlap. So the punchline behind why you would diagnose is because they might be wrong. And there's two categories that they might be wrong in. Number one, I think someone said it in here, John said it, is a misdiagnosis. This is something that your buyer has self diagnosed, but they self diagnose incorrectly. And this happens all the time. So I actually took a number of different doctor calls to study for this material and construct this material, meaning I had scheduled calls with doctors to ask them how they ask questions. And I asked each one of them the same thing at the very beginning. I said, how many of your patients, have self-diagnosed whenever they come in? They're like 95%. I'm like, cool. So out of those 95% that have self-diagnosed, how many are incorrect? They're like, can we be real with you? The hybrid was 90. That 90% of the time, their patients were incorrect in something. So the first bucket of things that you're trying to safeguard them from is a misdiagnosis, something that they believe about their current state that isn't true. The second bucket of things that you want to safeguard them against is a misdiagnosis. So in the medical profession, there's a misdiagnosis and then there's a missed diagnosis. Misdiagnosis is something that they self diagnose, but they self diagnose incorrectly, something that's not right. A misdiagnosis is something that they missed entirely when they self diagnose. And both of these things are the things that I am on the hunt for in discovery. So, discovery, it's in the name. I'm trying to discover. And pain is going to be a part of that. But what I'm really trying to discover is, are there pieces of misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis that I can find for my buyer within discovery so that I can help my buyer? So why would you would diagnose? From the punchline is correct a misdiagnosis and find a misdiagnosis. Part two of this is, what would you diagnose though? So what you would diagnose from the high level, and if you go into the one-sheeter that Min put in the chat, I don't know if he already put the article in there, but if you download this one-sheeter, there's a number of different things that you can diagnose. In specific, there's 7 about your buyer. And a lot of times they're going to self-diagnose quite a few of these. The first one is going to be a problem. So a problem is something that someone wants to solve or solve for. So a problem is going to be anchored around a metric, and we're going to go into a whole different world about problems. So the first thing that you would want to diagnose for your buyer is a problem, meaning the thing that they want to solve or solve for. The second thing that you want to diagnose is the root causes. What is causing the problem to exist as it is today that is the key to what they need to change to solve the problem? So that's the second piece. The third piece is current impacts. How is that problem currently impacting their team today, them, their team, etc.? And the difference between a problem and an impact is, think of an impact as extended pain, for instance. So, for instance, if it had taken me a long time to log into my webinar software today, that would have been a problem, right? It's really annoying. It's a pain in the present. But the impact to me would have been, there's 400 people on the line and I can't talk to them about something that I've been really excited for a long time, and that they won't show up to any of the other subsequent webinars because they're like, Beck doesn't show up to her webinars. And they start churning from my user base. And so all of a sudden, no one wants to attend my webinars anymore. So the pain could have been logging in. Thanks to Zettel, it wasn't. Could have been logging in. But the impact, it would be the extended pain of what would happen if that problem continues to exist. So the third piece here is going to be current impacts. The fourth piece here is going to be future impacts. So that's what's going to happen in the future if someone doesn't solve or solve for the problem correctly. So current is how it's currently extended pain impacting them. Future is how it's going to impact them in the future. And just as kind of a quick tip here, impacts are why people buy. It's to avoid or incur, usually avoid an impact. They're trying to avoid something very, very painful. So that's going to be what mobilizes someone eventually to buy. A current event trigger. This is going to be the fifth thing. A current event trigger. And again, y'all give me a thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat. Is it okay if I just go in really deep on this webinar? Like, don't worry about surface level and just go, okay. Olivia's like, sure, we're already here. So I'm going to go really technical on this webinar. I didn't even set an agenda. This first piece is all the definitions, is diagnosing. The second piece is going to be all about problems. And the third piece, I'm just going to go into a whole bunch of problems that you probably are running into that you probably didn't know about to kind of prove the efficacy of diagnostic selling. So I'm going to almost deploy the method on you. But this fifth piece is going to be a current event trigger. This is going to be the last event that ultimately propelled them to buy. There's always some type of last event that happened that made it the pain egregious enough in the present or the impact egregious enough in the future to where they said, okay, I've had it. It has to mobilize me to buy. You got to keep in mind, there's a number of things that could go wrong in buying something. So the reason people are resistant to change is not just because they have to change. They have to go through the pain of changing. They have to go through the costs of making that change. But most importantly, they're not sure if that change is actually going to pay off. And I'll give you an instance. So let's say that I want to learn a new, let's go sales training. Let's say I'm using some old methods that are working decently well for me. If some girl like me walks in and I start to learn all of these new methods, I want to be sure that the short-term pain of learning how to do something new is going to be worth the long-term gain, that it's going to solve a problem for me that is big enough that warrants me solving for it. So I'm not positive as a buyer, usually 100% that what I'm buying is going to solve my problem. So it takes a lot to get someone to be convinced to change, mostly in part to the fact that they're not convinced that even changing will actually get their outcome. So the current event trigger is the last thing that happened in their day to where they're like, screw it. Okay, I need to go ahead and I need to roll the dice and make this change. A future event trigger is something that's going to happen in the future that makes it worth solving for today. So Mari nailed it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'll give you an example of a future event trigger. Last year, I had the iPhone 8 for forever. And I mean forever. The thing was a tank. It lost charge all the time. But it took about 2 hours to lose charge, maybe 3. So I never bought a new phone. The pain was really high, but it wasn't high enough for me to buy a new phone until I decided to register for the New York Marathon. And so the future event for me was the New York Marathon. But the reason it made me buy the iPhone 14 in the present, back in July or whatever it was, August, let me see if anyone can guess. What was I afraid of that would happen during the marathon with that iPhone 8 if I kept it, if I stayed as is? What would happen to me if I had that iPhone 8? What made me finally say, okay, I'm going to buy? Yep, Ross, the battery would die halfway. And I would lose the music and I would lose my jams. I would lose the stopwatch, but you nailed it, Brock. I was scared that I was going to lose music. And if I lost music in the middle of the marathon, what might happen to me? How might that impact me? What was I scared of? I'll give you a hint. It was yeah, I wouldn't complete it. Yeah, my emotional state would go down so low. I was terrified that I could not finish. I won't even go into the length of it, but I've had a long, heartbreaking trajectory with running, and I was terrified that I would not finish that marathon. And so the idea of losing music in the middle of the marathon, I thought that's going to add to me not finishing the marathon, which would made me think, true story, that I was a fake for the rest of my life if I couldn't complete that marathon. So the future event trigger for me was the marathon. But the future impact that I was afraid of running into was I couldn't complete the marathon because of the lack of music, and so I would have felt like a fake for the rest of my life. So future event trigger is something that's gonna happen in the future that warrants the problem to be big enough solving for today. And the last thing is gonna be the solution. So those are the 7 things you're gonna diagnose, and we're gonna go into 3 steps of how, and then we're gonna get into problems. So again, just from the top, you've got your problem, which is the thing they want to solve or solve for. The second one is root causes. You have to diagnose a root cause. The current impact. What is the extended pain that's being caused by the problem? Future impact. What may or may not happen in the future if the problem continues to go unresolved? A current event trigger. What is the thing that happened today, currently, that made the pain big enough or the impact egregious enough to where they wanted to solve for it? The future event, the thing that makes the pain big enough hypothetically in the future and the impact big enough in the future to warrant them solving for it today. For the marathon, there was no pain real. There was the pain if I lost charge, but there wasn't pain enough that warranted me to buy. I kept the iPhone 8 for 6 years, y'all. 6 with that level of pain because it wasn't big enough until that impact was high enough. And then the last thing is going to be a solution. So that's what you're going to diagnose. So now that we know why we would diagnose, to correct a misdiagnosis or to find a misdiagnosis, and what we would diagnose, the 7 pieces of that, I'm going to go into how you can diagnose. So there's really 3 steps to it. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy, as my nephew says. There's only 3 steps to diagnostic selling. The first is uncover the buyer's self-diagnosis. What do they think the problem is? What do they think the root cause is? What do they think the current impact of their problem is? What do they think the future impact is? What was the current event trigger that was the last thing that made them want to buy? What's the future event trigger that makes them want to buy and solve for the problem today? And what do they think the solution is? Now, full disclosure, they're not going to have all of these. Sometimes they haven't self-diagnosed what they think the current event trigger was. Sometimes they haven't self-diagnosed what they think the future impact would be. Usually, in my experience, what they have always self-diagnosed, specifically if they come in inbound. Let's see if y'all can guess it. Out of those 7, what do you think are the 3 that they've usually self-diagnosed already when they come in the room? So your options are problem, root cause, current impact, current event trigger, future event trigger, and solution. What are the 3 that you think that I most often see on the floor of what they've gone ahead and self-diagnose? Current impact is usually not one of them, Brock. All right, good guess, very good guess. Solution, yes, they always have self-diagnosed, self-prescribed a solution. There's number 1. There's 2 more that they usually have in their head. Problem, that's the second one. They self-diagnose the problem that they want to solve. And then there's a third one, root cause. Tony got it. Root cause, solution, and problem. are usually the ones that they self-diagnose. So this step 1 is not asking them to self-diagnose. This step 1 is uncovering what have they self-diagnosed, because it's always in there. So I'll give you an example. Someone comes in and they're like, "Hey, Beck, so, I really want, cold email and cold call training for my rep. I have a team for my reps. I have a team of 25 SDRs and AEs." So what have they just told me? Which piece did they self-diagnose in that statement? See if y'all can guess. They said, "I want cold email and cold call training for my team of 25 AEs and SDRs." What kind of self-diagnosis is that? Which one of those 7 pieces? So they'll lead with one. Everyone's being quiet. No one wants. I blew up Brock. Not root cause, not problem. They say, "I want cold email and cold call training from you." That's when I went, "Yep, Robert got it. It's a solution." They're like, "I want cold email and cold call training." That's what they want to buy from me. So whatever one they lead with, your job is to, in step 1, uncover if the other ones exist. So I know that they want cold email, cold call training, but what do I not know at that point? They told me that they want cold email and cold call training. What do I not know? What's the biggest question that I don't know at this point? Yeah, root cause. There's one of them. I don't know why. I don't know what they're trying to solve. I don't know what they're trying to change to solve it. So if they lead with a solution, the biggest question I had is, well, if you want to dig into problem, you think about it. You've got to fill out the other 7. So if they tell me, "Oh, well, I want cold email and cold call training," I'm like, "Can you tell me a little bit about how your team's doing outreach today?" And they're like, "Yeah, so, they're sending 25 emails per day, every single one of the reps, and they're making about 10 cold calls. The quality's really piss poor." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by piss poor? Why do you think that?" They're like, "Well, I've just been reading through some of them, and I feel like they're not that great." And I'm like, "What's the open rate and the reply rate?" So I'm starting to build my diagnosis at the same time that I'm uncovering their diagnosis. But the first step is to uncover anything that they believe and why they believe that. My heart's beating fast. And the reason is 99.9% of sellers that would esteem themselves to be great sellers stop at step 1. They're like, "Oh, I've got the pain. Oh, I've got the problem that the buyer wants to solve. Oh, I've got, the solution that they believe they need or they want." One of the N in BANT is need. What do they think they need? It's a self-diagnosed need. But that's just step 1. Step 2 is you're going to develop your own expert diagnosis, but for the exact same criteria. What do you think the problem is? What do you think the root cause is? What do you think the current impact is of that problem? What do you think the future impact is of that problem if they don't solve it? What do you think the current event triggers are that make the problem we're solving for now? What do you think the future event triggers are that are going to happen in the future that make the problem worth solving for today? And what do you think the solution is? Before you uncover all of that, you cannot prescribe a solution. I heard an influencer at one point. I'm not going to blow up influencers, even though it's a favorite pastime of mine. Influencer A asked influencer B. I went to the car lot with my wife, and she knew what she needed in the car that she wanted. And the seller started to ask her a whole bunch of questions. Influencer A asked influencer B, "What do do you think that the seller should have continued to ask questions or should have just sold it to my wife?" And influencer B said, "I think they should have just sold it to your wife and called it a day." I about threw a rock at my computer. I was like, "No, you don't." And influencer A agreed. They're like, "Yeah, just sell it and move out of the way." If you just want to sell a bunch of crap to people, then yeah, I agree with you. Sell it to them and move them out of the way. But what if their wife was wrong? What if their wife was buying that car, it comes up later, oh, to avoid a certain amount of noise? What if that car wouldn't have helped her avoid the noise? You have just sold her something that would exacerbate her problem and take money out of her budget to do it. Anytime that you sell something to a leader, and this should be a responsibility, anytime you sell something to a leader, if it doesn't work, you have just sped up them potentially getting fired and burned some of their resources that they had to solve the problem. I want you to imagine that your prospect is in one of those like scary movies where they have like a chain around their neck, right? And like the fire's going and they're like progressively going towards this cliff, like Toy Story. You know how all the toys are like going down the little rubble. I think it's Toy Story 2 or 3, and there's this like bit of fire, pit of fiery doom at the bottom. I want you to imagine that they're headed towards that fiery doom. And if you sell them something that doesn't solve their problem, you have just sped Woody up towards that fire, and now he has less things to crawl onto to get out of the fire. That's what you've done to them. And it's not something that's malevolent, but I think it's something that happens all the time because we just, as the influencer said, sell it to them and call it a day. So, step 2, which is the most important part of not just diagnostic selling, but selling in general, if you want to do it ethically, is developing your own diagnosis. What do you believe that the problem is that you should solve to get the outcome that they're after? What do you believe that the root cause is? What do you believe the current impact is and the future impact is, and the current event trigger, future event trigger, and solution? Sometimes they'll overlap with your buyer, but in my experience, I would say 85 to 90% of what they believe usually is not correct to some degree. I have never been through a discovery call where I thought, oh, they've accurately diagnosed the entire way and they didn't miss anything. I've seen people who didn't misdiagnose, but I've never seen someone who has captured everything that I was thinking in the room of the stuff that I knew about them that might be hurting them. So, step 2 is how do you develop your own diagnosis, which we're going to go through the steps of. And then step 3, which is probably my favorite step, is to find and diagnose problems that they didn't know about. Again, the last 20 minutes of this is going to be Candyville. I'm just going to dump on y'all a whole bunch of problems that I usually see that people usually don't know about that are happening to them. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. But step 3, which is the fun part, is diagnosing problems that they don't know. So I think someone said it earlier. They said the goal of discovery, trying to build trust. This is how you build trust. When you can diagnose things that your buyer doesn't know, that's how they learn to trust you. So trust isn't just defined as I trust that you're telling the truth. Trust is defined as I believe that you're telling the truth. I believe that your intentions towards me are pure. And I believe in your ability. Right? So even if I believe that a salesperson is telling me the truth and I believe that they want to help me, but I don't believe they can, I can't trust them. So this is how you're gaining trust, is by diagnosing things that they didn't know about. I'll give you a great example, and then we're going to move on into the different types of problems. But I recently moved to Paris back in March. I went back to get more stuff in San Francisco, and I looked around and I'm like, why am I still here? This sucks. So I called my landlord and I cut my lease. I'm like, I'm just too happy in Paris. I'm like, I'm gonna move my stuff out into storage. So me and my dad was like clapping. My family's been trying to get me out of San Francisco forever for a number of different reasons, mostly around safety. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. And my dad said, I'm going to help you move by hiring a company that will move your things from point A in San Francisco, put them into storage until you come back, back from Paris and want to set up a US headquarters or whatever. And I'm going to move them to New Jersey because my next US move would be New York. I'm like, sounds great. So he goes and he rents a company. I, TLDR, got scammed. So they came in at roughly $5,000 to move my stuff. They got all my stuff into the truck and then tripled the price. They said the new price is $15,000. Keep in mind, we told them a furniture list that was dead on verbatim, meaning there wasn't an extra chair, there wasn't an extra anything. And they tripled the quote. In enters a guy named Milo on LinkedIn. I told the story very briefly. On LinkedIn, he said, I work with movers all the time. I'm building a software on movers. I can help you. At this point in time, Milo is random dude on LinkedIn that I don't know. I think I'd seen his picture maybe once, makes a couple comments every now and again. I've seen him around. He pings me and he's like, I'll help you. And I was like, my dad's one handling the move. He said, okay, enter him to me over email. Jumps on the phone with my dad, gets all of the different material that we sent him, videos of the truck, inventory lists, and he helps scour through and within an hour sends my dad and me back an entire list of how they overquoted me and ethically and pragmatically and practically breaking it down so that we could send it back over to the mover and be like, actually, you overquoted us $7,000, $7,500, and here's why. The reason I didn't do that to begin with, and the reason that I cried myself into oblivion and basically felt robbed and like I had no power, was because I didn't know how to do what Milo did. But Milo did, thank God, because he had the expertise. So this is where I gained trust in my buyer. Did I know Milo before? No, not at all. Did I like Milo before? No, not at all. I didn't even know who he was. Do I like Milo now? I want y'all to guess, yes or no, do I like Milo now? Do I trust Milo now? Random guy, out of the woodwork, for sure. Like this saying in my family, they're like, well, Milo says, and it's like the trump card at this point. Like, we're like, Milo's a part of the family now. He knows my dad, he knows my mom. And I'm a very private person who I would hypothetically date you for years and never introduce you to my family. And he's like a saying now. He is a saying in my family because of how much he stepped in and added one thing: expertise. He knew exactly what to ask for. He knew exactly how to diagnose the entire thing. So this is how you're going to build that trust with your buyers, is by being able to diagnose things that they don't know about. I didn't know that it was a 26-foot or a 20-foot truck versus a 26. I didn't know that they hadn't packed it completely to the top. I didn't know that how they're accounting for cubic feet. So that's where you're really going to win your buyer. So now that I've sufficiently overstayed my time, we're going to skip a couple slides here. We're going to get to problems. The place to always start in diagnostic selling or just in discovery in general is going to be the problem. So we're going to go into 7 rules about problems. This is part 2. So here's 7 rules to think about when it comes to problems. And the problem is always the first thing. You can't prescribe until you know the exact size of the problem. Not problems for buyers in general, like them, not problems that you solve for other people in case studies, but their problem in specific. And there is math to it. That's your litmus test. There's always math to the size of the problem, to quantifying the problem. So the first rule of a problem is there's a difference between a pain and a problem. A pain is going to be anything negative in the current, anything negative in general, negative experience. And a problem is going to be anything that someone solves or solves for. So the impact of the difference of those two is not all pains are problems, meaning not all negative experiences am I going to solve or solve for, and not all problems are painful yet. Sometimes there is no pain in the present. What you're solving for is to avoid a pain and deafening impact in the future. So pain is any negative experience, and a problem is something you solve or solve for. So that's going to be the ambit of a problem. So can anyone jump in the chat? By the way, I just say George said wedding bells. See, that's a pain. Here's a negative experience in the present. So Y'all could jump in the chat. Can anyone name a really something that's annoying about their day right now? Any kind of pain that they're experiencing with anything. Something slow, something humidity. Okay? Aaron, I'm going to pick on you. Where do you live? I'm going to guess Houston. Man, I think everyone. Okay, Nashville. Okay, how it's hot. We got a lot of hot and humid. Okay, so have you done anything about the humidity recently? The heat or the humidity recently, Aaron? Have you made any purchases around it? Depressingly hot. Beer. I turned up the AC and you put on some clothes. Been any major purchases? Aaron, I'm specifically talking to you. Not really. How hot is it in your apartment or house right now, if you don't mind me asking? Give it to me in Fahrenheit. I'm in Paris, so I miss Fahrenheit. How hot is it in your apartment, your house, give or take? Probably 70. I want you to imagine that in your house, do you live alone or do you have other people? You live no family. Okay. I want you to imagine all of a sudden that it was instead of 70, it was 95. Would you make a big purchase? Oh, you have kids and a wife. Oh, awesome. This is gonna make it worse. I want you to imagine all of a sudden that it went to 90 or 95. What would you buy, Aaron? He said, of course. Of course I would buy something. 2 AC units. But why are you not buying those 2 AC units now? Why would it take till 90 or 95? Because you already have to. I already have to. And how bad is the heat right now? Roughly? Say scale of 1 to 10. Inside, it's fine. Okay, so it's more outside. When you walk outside, you get the back sweat. So point being, you can have pain. Sometimes you leave the door open, it gets humid inside, it gets muggy, your kids start to fight with your significant other, blah, blah. But he hasn't solved for it yet because the pain isn't bad enough. But the minute that pain got bad enough, Aaron said, I'm going to go ahead and move and make a purchase. So everything hypothetically we could solve for. My dad is retired now. I thought when he retired at 57 years old, okay? And I thought when he retired, oh my gosh, he loves to solve problems. He loves his spreadsheets and his list, but he's going to run out of crap to do. My dad is now 68 years old and he still has not run out of a list of things to do and problems to solve. And the reason is there are infinite number of things that you could do. It's going to come down to priority. And priority is going to come down to how big is the impact, how aggressive is the pain, and how egregious is the pain. So rule number 1 is a pain and a problem are different things. Just because something's negative doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. Rule number 2 is a problem is only, this is a very important one. This is probably my favorite rule. I really like rules, y'all. Rule number 2, a problem is only a problem in the presence of a metric. Hear me out. I heard a CMO of a very well-known conversation intelligence vendor say products only help you do one of two things, save time or save money. And I'm like, sure, in benefit-centric selling, save time, save money, more time, more money, leaving revenue on the table. But what it should help you do is to solve a problem. And a problem is only a problem in the presence of a metric. Jordan Peterson talks about this actually a lot. He talks about how you can't ever have a positive action without a negative repercussion. I go out drinking, think I can dance like a wizard, and then I feel like crap the next day. You can only have a positive uptick without a negative retribution if there's a goal. So a problem is always anchored around that buyer persona's metric. So I want everyone to do me a favor. You're sitting at your computer, just play along with me for a second. I want everyone to close their eyes. Yes, you, the person who's still slacking, I want you to stop, close your eyes, and think of your 5 or 6 buyer personas. And if you can't name what they are metriced on, their lagging indicator, without opening your eyes, then I want you to find those out by the end of the week. Because a problem, something they're going to solve for, is always going to orient itself around their metric. So all the time I'll hear on LinkedIn people say like, "Oh, you should get the buying committee in the room." By the way, you can open your eyes. You should get the buying committee in the room and get them to agree on what the problem is. And I'm like, Brendan, they're never going to freaking agree on what the problem is. Because if you get a marketer and a sales enablement and an SDR leader and a sales leader in the room, they're never going to agree on what the problem is because they're never going to agree on what the metric is that they need to be after hitting. Because a marketer is metric on something different than sales enablement, and sales enablement is metric on something different than a VP of sales. And a VP of sales is metric on something different than an SDR leader. If I'm an SDR or an SDR leader, do I care about closed won? Really? Yes or no? Let's see, I'll go in the chat. If I'm an SDR or an SDR leader, nope. Tony got it. Not really. And why don't I really care about that as an SDR? Why do I not really care about closed won? That seems odd. You're not paid on closed won revenue. Bada bing, Tony's brilliant. It's not the metric I'm after. So do I care about it? Hypothetically, yes. I got career pathing and not my circus, not my monkeys. I got career pathing and I want to look good and blah, blah. Not really, though. What I'm really after is booked meetings. So if I'm selling whatever, sales training, blah, blah, prospecting training, and I'm selling it to an SDR and an SDR leader and a sales leader in the exact same way, I'm insane. I shouldn't be selling sales training for sure. Because an SDR is just interested in how it can help them book more meetings. And an AE is after how can it help them close one more revenue. Part of that is booking meetings, but not the only part. So let's say that the SDR books 1,000 meetings and they send it over to an account executive. Say they book 1,000 meetings on outbound. What are some questions that the AE would then ask about those meetings? See if y'all can jump in the chat. I'm an AE, SDR books me 1,000 meetings, sends them over to my calendar, bada bing, or 100. Let's be more realistic, 100. What are some questions I would start to ask about those meetings? I'd be like, great, thanks for the 100 meetings, but I'd probably have a couple of questions in my mind about them. You know, would or should? Would they? Would they hypothetically? Will they ask about them, Sam? 100 meetings were just set on my calendar from the SDR. What are some answers that I want to know about these 100 meetings? What are some data points that I would be interested or wanting to know about the meetings that were sent over to me? I think I've overstayed my welcome. Yeah, are these inbound or outbound? It's a brilliant one. How about who are these leads? What company do they come from? Conversion rate. Yeah, is the decision maker? Do they have a buyer intent? Do they have a budget? And the reason I want to know all these things about these meetings is because, yes, I want more pipeline, but I'm more so measured on closed won. So I don't want to waste my time on a ton of meetings that don't work. So a problem, something I'm going to make a move to solve or solve for, is only a problem in the presence of a metric. So if I'm an SDR, and then my problem is not booking more quote unquote high quality meetings. It only is a problem if my meetings aren't getting approved and hitting SQL criteria. And so I can't hit my metric. But as long as that's good, it's not a problem. So I would always orient if you're talking to a sales enablement leader, you need to talk to them about how your solution, hypothetically, blah, blah, would fit into and anchor into helping them hit their metrics more readily. You know, so time to first deal, time to full ramp, training adoption, methodology adoption, tech adoption, or what they're measured on. I'm not going to go through all this. I don't have time. problem, or the third rule, a pain only becomes a problem under certain conditions. The two conditions are the pain is egregious enough in the present, or the level of impact gets egregious enough if I don't solve for the problem. I'll give you an example, and we're going to move on to the fourth rule. I was at a training at one point, and it was pretty cold in the room. It's like 65, I don't know. And everyone had made comments about it all day. So at the end of the day, I said, so for instance, y'all, is it cold in this room? They're like, yeah, it's been cold all day. I'm like, it has been cold all day, but no one has actually gotten up and done something about it. So I turned to one of the reps. I said, what if it got down to 50? They were like, we do something about it. They're like, we'd go find hotel management because the pain was big enough in the present at that point. Then I said, okay, so that's pain being big enough in the present. But the second one on impact, I turned to the VP of sales. I said, what if it stayed at 65, but some of the reps started churning from the session and getting sick because of it? Would you solve for it? And he said, hell yes. And I was like, why would you solve for it? He's like, because we paid a lot of money for this training. And, I want my reps to be able to stay around and think about it and learn and put it into play and raise my conversion rates. So the first one, when it got down to 50, the pain's big enough in the present, I'm going to solve for it. The second one, if the impact's big enough, his reps start churning because of it, and he's going to solve for it. But if not, it's just a pain that no one thinks about. So even though we had made comments about it all day, no one solved for it the entire day, even though it was a pain. So the third rule is a pain becomes a problem, meaning something negative turns into something they solve or solve for whenever it's big enough in the present, pain's big enough in the present, or the impact's big enough that they don't. Now we're going to get into the gritty. And I promise we're going to do about 5 more minutes, and then I'm just going to go into Candyville, telling you a whole bunch of unknown problems that you likely don't know about and likely have. The fourth is the size of a problem always equals the amount of pain plus the amount of impact. I'm going to teach you how to gamify this. Number 5 is buyers only buy based on the size of the problem. So if I'm in sales and I'm smart and I know that the amount of pain plus the impact is the size of the problem, and that buyers only, Sam's like, and buyers only buy based on the size of the problem, which direction would I want to take the problem? Bigger or smaller if I want to sell more stuff? Let's say you're just strictly selfish and buyers buy based on the size of the problem. Do you want the problem to get bigger, or do you want the problem to be smaller if you're on the sales floor and you want to hit quota? Bigger. So rule 6 is the size of the problem is only equal to the buyer's perspective of the size of the problem. So I'll give you an example of how this can help you, how diagnostic selling can help you, and then we're going to go into unknown problems. Let's say that the buyer believes that the problem, meaning the pain and the impact today combined, is the size of the state of Texas. It's a big state. But I know that there's a shit ton of other states. They're only going to buy based on the size of Texas because that's all they know. And until you go into discovery and you diagnose for them in specific that Oklahoma exists and California exists and Maine exists and New York exists and Florida and what John Kerry called the flyover country. Sorry to anyone in Iowa. I probably just blew rapport with everyone. If you want to grow the size of the problem, you need to grow their perspective of the size of the problem. But you can't do that until you figure out, number 1, what do they believe the size of the problem is? And number two, what do I believe is the size the problem is? So the step one of diagnostic selling and figuring out what they self-diagnose, yes, is in part to correct a misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis, but more so, let me be very clear. This is going to help your buyer and help your numbers. It's going to ethically help your buyer, and it's the only way to sell where you're not just trying to manipulate them, to be candid. But if I'm a completely selfish rep and I just want to blow past quota and put a crap ton of money in the back of a convertible and like blow down Highway 1 and be like, I'm the queen or king, this is the way to do it. The first thing I got to figure out is what do they think is the size of the problem? And then the second is what do I think is the size of the problem? And I am hoping for that I will find out that they only think that it's the size of Texas, and the size of Texas was good enough to mobilize them to buy. And I'm like, well, holy crap, you didn't know about the 49 other states in there. But I have to figure out what do they believe and then what truly exists so that I can add to the size of the problem. So a lot of people will say like, oh, well, you need to define the problems so that you can reorient your buyer. I'm like, no, you need to find problems that they don't know that exist that are currently happening to them. Number one, so you can help them. Number two, so you can help them avoid it. But number three, so you can sell a bigger deal because you just found a bigger problem. So anytime that you find a future impact that they didn't know about, you can tack that into the size of the problem. Anytime you found a problem that they didn't know about that you can solve with your solution, you just tack that into the size of the problem. Anytime you just find out a current impact, a current event trigger, a future event trigger that's going to happen later down the line that they don't know about that calls a situation that's worth solving for in the present, you can tack that into the size of the problem. And they buy based on the size of the problem. So even if I'm just after diagnosing to blow up my quota, this is the way to do it. So every single time that I find something that my buyer doesn't know, I am stoked. Because I'm like, number one, they didn't know this. And hey, worst case scenario, now they do, and now they can do something about it. And if they don't do something about it, at least they knew. So now ethically, I feel fine. But number two, holy crap, man, if they're going to buy, it's kind of like walking around and being like, does anyone have buyer intent for cancer medication? It's like, well, first of all, Brendan, they don't know if they have cancer. Why would they have buyer intent for any kind of medication that they don't know that they have the sickness? Number two, you don't know if they have cancer until you find that out, until you find that out in the room. So that is the pinnacle of it, the cathexis of it. So rule number 7 is how you can increase the size of a problem, increase the buyer's likelihood to buy, and increase the size of the sale is by diagnosing things that they don't know about and adding them to the things that they do. So anyone who's going outbound, if you're going outbound and you're talking about pain, you're not going to get people to respond to you. Because if they have pain, pain is defined as something they already knew about. So if they're not doing something about it yet, it's because they know that the pain's not bad enough or the impact's not bad enough to date to do something about it. So if you're going outbound and you're like, hey, so we work with people who have the pain of not being able to hit quote unquote blah, blah. If it was bad enough, they would have already inbounded. But what you can mobilize them with is by finding out something that they didn't know, a future impact that they're going to run into. And when they find that out, maybe that will mobilize them to buy. They wouldn't beforehand on the information that they already knew. But when you tack in there that there's a future impact that they didn't know about, all of a sudden they have buyer intent. You've just mobilized them. So like those slides are why outbound is broken. It's because we're all going after pain or need. Are you in the market for it? Do you have a need for it? We work with people who are struggling to, they don't know if they're struggling to blank. That's where you're going to make your money. And that's where you're going to cause the buyer intent. So this third piece of it, we're at 6:30. I'm going to skip through these 12 types of problems. We're going to cover that webinar 3. If y'all come back. If y'all come back. I don't know if anyone's out there still. I'm having fun. I'm having. So, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go into unknown problems. Do y'all mind if I turn on my light? It's dark in here. Do y'all mind if I turn on my light? Thumbs up or thumbs down. We're going to go into part 3. I'm just going to sprint and hope that y'all say yes. We're going to go into part 3. Part 3 is lightning round. This is going to be, don't look at all that stuff. I'm moving into my new place. It is not decorated out. Yes, it's stressing me out. Part 3 is examples. Yes, Martin. Martin, don't go. Come on. What do you have to do? Part 3 is examples of unknown problems. You know what? You know what, Martin? There's not a recording if you leave. I'm just joking. There will be a recording. I'm going to do 15 minutes of rocket fire problems that I know that exist. And this is going to be spicy. I'm going to light up a lot of influencers and I'm going to light up a lot of common knowledge in here. Part 3 is examples of unknown problems that you probably didn't know about that you probably are running into. Problem number 1 that very few people are thinking about is email deliverability. This means that they're actually getting the cold email that you're sending. So Martin said bye. Bye, Martin. So if you're listening to this and you have less than a 50% open rate, like you log into your sales engagement instance and you look at the open rate, you have an email deliverability issue. Period. If your open rate is less than 50%, it is not all about quality of why people aren't opening your emails and responding to them and booking meetings, and then you're falling behind on pipeline quota, close one quota because of it. Email deliverability is one of the most unknown problems. And what they're tracking for, what they're looking for typically is for email deliverability. Think of email deliverability as like an ongoing report card about how you're behaving in the email world. And what they're looking for is non-human behavior. And yes, Brendan, Google is as smart as you are. That slide's just for me. So these are the things that make you teacher's pet when it comes to email deliverability, meaning they'll deliver more of your emails from a cold prospecting perspective. When people open your emails, when they move those emails to another folder, these are positive points. Think of it like that. When they add you to the contacts, they reply to you, they forward, or they save you as a contact. Those are the positive points that you can win from an email deliverability perspective. Keep in mind, what I do as an individual hurts or helps my email deliverability and also my entire team. So if you have a team of 50 reps, let's say, and 5 of them are being bad boys in terms of email deliverability, it's going to hurt the rest of your team. These are the things that you want to optimize for that will help you get more of your emails delivered to your prospects. And these are the things that give you detention. Not opening, people who don't open your emails, people who delete before opening. So this is a big one. Delete it before opening, marking you as spam or unsubscribing. Those are the things that are going to hurt you the most. So here's the tips on email deliverability. So I'm just going to go Candyville. Less links, the better. When it comes to links, verified sites only and no broken paths, meaning if they click on a link and it goes nowhere, that's going to hurt your email deliverability. And yes, Google can tell. No shortened URLs, Bitly, that's going to hurt you. A newsletter shouldn't be all as one image. That's going to hurt you from an email deliverability perspective. No GIFs, for instance. Images are okay, but after 4, you're going to tank your deliverability. So no more than 4 images in an email. I don't know why you'd want to include more than 4 in an email anyway, but I digress. Sam, damn it. How did you find out how to put a GIF in there? I hate GIFs. God, I hate GIFs. So Lempire actually did a study on this, and it will decrease your reply rate by 20%, putting GIFs in there. Thank God, because I think they're tacky. But anywho, not yours, Sam, but everyone else's are tacky as shit. So no social words. Here's a big one. Ross, no more GIFs in there. No social words. So like if you say your LinkedIn clip, it can put it into the social promos folder. So again, anything that doesn't end up in their primary inbox, it's going to hurt you. So no saying like your clip on LinkedIn because you run the risk of heading into the social promos folder. Avoid all caps. Avoid exclamation points. Avoid red font. A big one is I want you all to look back. If your subject lines are the same, if you send out 50 emails that have all the same subject line, Google is going to say, yeah, I think that's non-human behavior. I think that's a prospecting bot. And they're going to hurt your email deliverability. The more sends that you make, the less that they start sending your love notes to your prospects. No more than 50 emails a day. Otherwise, you're going to tank your deliverability. So people gave me a really hard time about personalization at scale. They're like, well, can you scale it? I'm like, well, what do you want to scale, Brendan? I want to scale results, but I digress. You can't scale past 50 because it's going to hurt your email deliverability and you're going to hit the state of inflection point. So no more than 50 cold emails a day, not all at the same time and not equidistant. So no 105, 110, 115, 120. They're like, this is a robot. So I'm going to hurt you on email deliverability. And then here are words to avoid. So I'm just going to rattle these off so that you know them. Yes, you'll get the deck. Everyone but Martin gets the deck afterwards. Accordingly, lose, best, cure, amazing, home, avoid, remove, problem, never, solution, increase, chance, serious, compete, refund, success, stop, cost, acceptance, compare, friend, information requested, opportunity, offer, fantastic, increase sales. I put 70 of them in here. There's a whole nother slide with some more. Catch, winning, save, free info, certified brand, gift, instant, sign up for free. The word free is also going to hurt you. No questions asked, discount, quote, score, trial, unlimited, save up to, click here, free trial, boss, apply, buy. Any of these words, the more you use them, it's not like you use one and you're going to tank your deliverability, but the more that you use them, the more it's going to hurt. So a non-glamorous tip is set up a custom tracking link. If you don't know what that is, go to your marketer or sales operations and ask about it. Get your DKIM, DMARC, and SPFF, and ensure that you're not blacklisted. These are the ones that are going to help the most, but they're super boring. Everyone likes lists. So just stay away from these words, do these tips, and you'll help with your email deliverability. But if you have less than an 50% open rate, it is faster to stop what you're doing and address email deliverability than to think about quality, period. Prospecting especially is a science, not an art. So that's going to be the fastest way to do it. The second biggest problem that people don't know about, and this is for marketers, sales leaders, especially if you're hurting for pipeline and can't hit quota, demo request conversion. I probably looked at upwards of 2,000 programs on how many people who request a demo who actually get a demo. And the usual process is you input your information, maybe have them ask a couple questions, and then it says someone will email you and get back to you. You round robin to your SDRs. They reach out, they try and schedule some time to have a call, 15 minutes, ask BANT questions, and send over to the AE. I've looked at a couple thousand programs. The highest conversion rate I've ever seen to date is 22.5, meaning if 100 people requested a demo, the highest I've seen it looking at a few thousand programs is that 22.5 of them actually got a demo. Wait, don't let that sink in. So let's argue that 35% of them are truly unqualified. Best case scenario, you're probably leaking out about 40% of your demo requests, people who know your product, quote unquote, need your product, want to evaluate your product, and are qualified, even towards the BANT criteria. You're leaking out 40% of them because of demo request process. Lowest I've seen is 4%. The person looked very not okay at the end of the meeting. The average I've seen is about 9. Really, really shocking, but this is the second biggest. So here's some litmus tests that if you're doing these things, you probably have I've never seen a company without a problem, meaning not like one that wasn't big enough to solve. Yeah. I like the more and more I looked into it, I was like, holy crap. So, and people don't look at it because they're like, oh, this is, inbounds. These are the easy ones. So first litmus test that you probably have a demo request process or a demo request conversion in the relative sewer is if you're round robining leads to SDRs or AEs. There's your quick bullet that you likely are in that anywhere from 4 to 22.5. The second litmus test, I'm going to speed up here. If someone requests a demo on the weekend or after hours and your SDR or AE or whoever it is reaches out the next day or Monday, guaranteed you have a demo request conversion problem. So statistics will show that if it's any more than 5 minutes, you are just going to have a dramatic drop off of people who actually schedule a time. Speed to lead is the fastest predictor, not only of someone getting the meeting and getting the cycle, but who they ultimately buy from is speed to lead. The third litmus test is if the goal of the SDR is reaching out or whoever is reaching out is to schedule a short 15-minute call to quote unquote better gear for the demo to ask them BANT questions. Do you have budget? Do you have authority? Blah, blah, blah. And the reasoning behind this, you want to prevent from wasting your AE's time. If that's happening, for sure you have a demo request problem, conversion problem. Fourth is if someone requests a demo on your site and they aren't qualified for whatever reason, you don't think they're big enough, title's not big enough, blah, 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 and they don't get a demo, for sure you have a conversion problem with the leads that are qualified. And then the fifth is, and this is kind of a catch-all, if your user can't schedule time with an account executive on your website, you have a demo request, you're hemorrhaging them. So a question that I ask people a lot of times in discovery, to diagnostic selling's point, I don't ask them, do you have a demo request conversion problem? They would say no, they don't know. But I ask them questions like, hey, can you describe to me the process? Are you round robining your leads? And they're like, yes, we're round robining our leads to our SDRs. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, there goes 50% of their leads. I'm like, okay, so what happens if I reach out, like I request a demo on the weekend? And they're like, oh, well, they follow up on Monday. I'm like, oop, there goes another 25% of their leads. I don't correct them in the moment, but in my head, I'm getting excited because I'm like, I'm finding more and more and more problems that I can solve for them that they don't know that exist. So these are all, you would never find these problems by asking them, do you have a demo request conversion problem? Do you have an email deliverability problem? You probably all up to this day would have said no until I say, if you have an open rate that's less than 50%, you have one, period. The average industry open rate is 15 to 25. So the average industry, prospector is going to have an email deliverability problem. So point being, I'm never asking them to self-diagnose a problem that they didn't even know that they have. And then the last one, I have a whole bunch of solutions in there for you. I have a 7-step process if you want to solve for that. And you'll see it in the deck where to go. I have a whole one-sheeter. The last one, my heart's going to start beating fast. If y'all have been here the whole time, this is probably my new heartthrob. The last one is that prospects aren't reading your emails even if they're getting them. Okay? So I was going to take y'all through this whole, actually, let's do this. Y'all jump in the chat. Tell me a few traits that come to mind when you think of a seller. What do you have? What's the profile of a person that you think, like when you think of seller, typical seller, pitch slapper, good, Laurie. Persistence, that's a nice way of saying it, Charles. What else do you think? Talk more than they listen, gob shit. Slippery, trying to make a living, brilliant, handsome, fun. Tony, clearly you're biased. Totally. You look up the definition of pink ties. Who are y'all looking at as sellers? You go up and look the definition of a seller like on Google, you get 42 different definitions. 41 of them are negative. Or not seen as good, right? So the reasoning behind this, I don't have time to go into it, is a buyer's main goal is to solve a problem at the lowest price point as possible with the fewest amount of products to do it. And a seller's goal is to hit quota attainment by selling as many products as possible at the highest price point. So the reason they don't trust us is they shouldn't. What a buyer and seller want are mutually exclusive. I can't sell an item at $100 and the buyer buys an item at $80. So it's a power war, right? So you don't want someone to think of you as a seller. Because the minute they do, the most paralyzing thing to any interaction on the sales floor is they think of you as a seller. They think of you as seller, you're dead. I'm not going to share information with you. Why would they? You're the opposing team. You want to charge them more than they want to. They want to go at the lowest price point possible. So the minute that you say, my heart is beating fast because of two reasons. The minute that you say anything that a normal seller says, they're going to see you as a seller, and all that bad crap is going to come into their mind. So, can anyone jump in the chat and give me some typical outreach examples of things that sellers say in cold emails, let's say? What are some typical phrases that they use? Let me be honest. Oh, I hate that one. Saw you on LinkedIn. Synergy. We're the best at. We're the number one. Just following up, just circling back, just bubbling this to the top of your inbox. Happy Monday. Hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. SEO, ROI, end to end. We're the number one blank that helps blank do blank. We work with leaders just like you who are struggling to want to chat. 15 minutes, quick intro, quick question, quick chat. Cheers. Point being, you say any of that, they'll see you as a seller. You're dead. So here's a list of all the things that sellers say that the minute that you say them, you're going to damage conversion for everything. Conversion that they talk back, conversion that they're willing to open up to a conversation, they're willing to trust you, they're willing to reply, they're willing to take a meeting, they're willing to open up their personal information about what their problem is, and that they're willing to close. Why? Because we don't trust sellers, and we shouldn't. So if you say any of these words, bad, very bad. It's not that they're bad, they just see you as a seller. Corporate Bro actually took one of my posts today, and he just put a video live where he's recording all these. I don't know if anyone knows Corporate Bro. He's one of my favorites. Point being, pick your brain, virtual coffee e-meet. Don't want to waste your time. I was really impressed by your profile. You say any of this, and you're dead. You're a seller in their head. 15 minutes, congrats. People say, when I put this post live, people said, oh, well, Becc, what am I supposed to say now? I'm like, Brendan, let me be very clear. There are roughly, give or take, 600,000 words in the English language. This is like 200 of them. So what do you say is the other 599,750? Okay? So you hit any of these, the more that you hit, you're dead. Here's the interesting thing. Where you should avoid using them. This is why my heart is beating fast. There are a number of different patterns of how, yes, Olivia, it's an imaginary seller. There are a number of different patterns of how people read emails, websites, etc. And the most predominant one is known as, here's some of the patterns: F-shaped pattern, spotted layer cake, Z pattern. Yeah, bypassing. That's an interesting one. Point being, there's a number of different studies. The most predominant in cold email is called the F-shaped pattern. So here are two massive misdiagnoses that have been sent out to you by influencers for years and recently. Number one, if you ever hear an influencer telling you that you should optimize the F-shaped pattern, the F-shaped pattern, how someone reads an email is based on how much they trust you, how high quality the email is, and how much they knew you beforehand. The F-shaped pattern is actually one of the most deleterious patterns that readers can fit into. So if they're reading in the F-shaped pattern, it's because your email in their brain is trash. They're like, sales email, poor quality. So I've seen a number of different posts out there on LinkedIn. They're like, you should read emails in the F-shaped pattern. It's the most common one. Get your buyers to read here. And I'm like, no, buyers do read in that pattern the most often, but the huge misdiagnosis by several influencers out there right now, not to take it hard on them, is that you should be doing this. You shouldn't. It's just the most common pattern because of how bad our emails are. But if you're going to assume that the email is bad and that you're going to read in the F-shaped pattern, the second misdiagnosis that I've seen is people say start at 2 o'clock and go clockwise. By the way, how you can get to know any of these eye tracking patterns, if you go online and just search eye tracking patterns, they basically put goggles on people and they see how they read emails on desktop, laptop, and mobile. But if you're going to stick and you're going to just assume that your email's bad, your reader's going to read like that. The second huge misdiagnosis that I've seen people put out there is they say start at 2 o'clock and go clockwise. They got the 2 o'clock part right, but that's a number two. They don't start at 2 o'clock. They read in the pattern of an F. So they go, if this is the email, they go 1 o'clock first, the beginning of the first line first. Then they go to the end of the first line. This is where the number two is, where they got confused, started posting about it. Then they go to the beginning of the second line. Then they scan across, end of the second line. And then they go down the row. So it makes a pattern of F. So point being, we're going to close out. If you're going to use any of these words, just following up, I'd love to network, touching base, just wondering, hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. Happy Monday. My name is blank, and top priorities in 2023, connect, quick chat. If you're going to use any of those words, I pray to the sales gods in heaven that they are not in one of these spots. Beginning of the first line, end of the first line, beginning of the second line, end of the second line, or down the row on the left-hand side. If they open your email and it says, hope you're well in that first line, which is usually where it is, it's the most valuable real estate of the email. If they see that, they will log out and they'll never read it again. Send it to trash. So the third biggest unknown problem is if you're using, and I'm going to challenge you just like I challenge myself. I didn't automatically stop using all these phrases. It took quite a while. The rules are the more that you use them, the less they're going to read the email and the less they're going to trust you because of it. So I would just try to commit to memory. Another exercise that you could do is go through your spam folders. And if you do me one massive favor, and then we're going to close out. Over the next 3 weeks, I want you all to do me a favor. Do two things. Number one, when you get emails that you deleted before even opening it or deleted after opening it, I want you to take a mental monologue of all the different times that you deleted and how did you know it was a sales email? How did you know it was a sales email before you opened it? How did you know it was a marketing email? How did you know it was trash? How long did you give the email before you logged out? When someone said, we have mutual connections and I want to connect and mutually beneficial add value, cheers, Becc. What were you thinking? What did you think they wanted? Did it cause you to respond? And I want you to be very, very introspective of how you operate as a buyer for the next 3 weeks. The second thing I want you to do, if you don't mind, is the average human being lies 17 times per day. And we're going to deem it as a white lie when we think the agenda's clean, so it renders whatever we're saying as we're not malevolent. So if I'm like, yeah, that dress looks great, Brendan, the agenda's clean, so I'm like, the lie doesn't matter. So when you lie over the next few days, when a seller walks up to you, walk into a retail store, and they're like, how can I help you? And you're like, I'm just looking. Or you're like, hey, can you send me an email? Or, hey, I'm running into a meeting when you weren't running into a meeting. When you lie, I want you to take a mental note of almost like a diary of why did I lie? What did I really want? Why did I say that I was running into a meeting when I wasn't? And just think about that behavior, because once you start to get to know your own buying behavior, it's going to help. It's going to be 10,000 times easier to see it coming when it's coming from the other side. When they're like, hey, quick question. You're like, ooh. And you're like, crap, I can't ask a quick question. That is the fastest way I grew as a seller, is to think, what am I thinking when they're selling to me? So they're likely thinking that when I'm selling to them. So that is everything. We lasted 90 minutes. Thank you so much to everyone for coming today, for dealing with the couple of issues at the beginning. You guys were really fun, and for not leaving me up here on stage and making it super interactive. I had a lot of fun. This is webinar 1 on diagnostic selling. Uncover their self-diagnosis, uncover your own expert diagnosis, challenge the difference if they've made a mistake or they've missed something, and then diagnose problems they don't know about. This is webinar 1. And webinar 2, if you didn't have enough fun today, webinar 2, we're going to go into what do you challenge? So when people say you need to challenge your seller, challenge, what do you challenge? What are you challenging? What root causes are you challenging? What problems are you challenging? And most importantly, how do you do that without triggering the wrong ego state so that they hate your guts and they don't open up to you because of it? So how can you do it in the most effective adult ego state clean way? Thanks everyone for watching. We will send this deck out, and then we're going to be doing a webinar for the next 5 weeks on Tuesday, sorry, lost track of time. Tuesday, I was in the basically U.S. Embassy all day trying to get my Parisian license. So sorry, I'm a little jaded right now. We're gonna be doing it every Tuesday for 5 weeks, same time, same place. Tune in for webinar 2 on what we're gonna challenge. Either way, thank you so much for today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.